Welcome to the show, Gearheads. We just watched the Formula One Spanish Grand Prix. Going to break that all down for you here. This is John Massengill sitting in the studio with Jonathan Green. Les Kaiser's joined us, and we have Mr. Bob Varsha via Zoom. Jonathan, I want to start with you. What did you think of overall of the race today?
Yeah, overall, I mean, no surprise. We did predict that Lewis Hamilton would win it, and he did. But I think we can now, without a doubt, and I know you've probably been saying this at Portugal too, but I think that Red Bull have now got a car that is capable of beating Hamilton. Today's strategy won, and Verstappen did what I expected him to do. But as he said, he was a sitting duck once they took that strategy move, a la Hungary, and we'll hear about that and talk about that later. But all in all, I think there is hope that it's going to be a heck of a season.
Bob, what do you think about, I mean, look, could Red Bull have done anything to defeat that strategy?
Yeah, I think they could, actually. I think they could have stopped for the red stripes off his tires with about 15, 16 laps to go. They should have covered Hamilton's move if they wanted to go with a harder tire. You know, they were caught napping.
Yeah,
I'm afraid. And they got a bad pit stop, and things kind of tumbled downhill. But on the other side, we talked this morning in our pre-race show extensively about what makes Lewis Hamilton so good, like all the other great drivers. And this was a classic example of driver, car, and team all working together. I think one of the announcers on the Sky feed said it perfectly. Lewis drove his heart out, trusted the team to make the right strategy calls. The numbers got crunched correctly. It all came together, and that's how you wind up winning races.
Absolutely. And, with 22 laps left, he had 23 seconds of a gap. And, nothing short of phenomenal to make that up, not only on Max, but you just looked at his pace against others. Some of them had actually pitted right at the same time as him. And so it still demonstrates what a skill he holds and how interesting this is. Yeah, I know. I mean, in history, we've seen that with Schumacher. But, gosh, I think we'll think of Hamilton in the same light as Schumacher later on after the sting of seeing him win all the time fades a little.
Let me give out the phone number in case anybody wants to call in and join the show and tell us what you thought of the race. 512-643-5483. Jonathan, Les was talking about the brilliance of Hamilton coming through that. But, I mean, honestly, he made it look so simple. I mean, is that because the strategy was so good, or is it just Hamilton's that good?
Both.
Yeah.
I mean, simply both. And it's what we said at the top of the show, at the beginning in the pre-show, that combination of Mercedes on top of their game and all questions of rake and rule changes and floor differences and all the rest of it seem to be going out the window because Mercedes are back to what they do best, which is win. And win on strategy and on the day. And as Hamilton said in his post-race interview, they knew what they were going to do from Friday onwards. This wasn't a guess, this wasn't and the record shows, they've been doing it consistently. And so to beat them, you've got to do something special. And I agree with Bob. They kind of dropped the ball a little bit, Red Bull. They could have been more risky. They took the risk at the beginning. They had a poor pit stop, 2 seconds slower than Hamilton's. So they were always chasing it.
So this was just another
day at the office.
Just another Mercedes simulation number 73. We plug that in and
kinda.
Yeah.
That's I feel like it's your big brother that always Go ahead, Bob.
Well, I was going to say, I talked in the pre-race show about Hamilton going out on used tires in qualifying, and everybody was wondering, what are they doing? And I suggested that because at the rate they were using up tires, I think Mercedes wanted to know how quickly Lewis could lap on used. I think they were the yellows, the medium compound at the time. And look what happened. And this last set of tires Lewis was on in this race as he ran down Verstappen was a set of used medium tires. And yet he was more than a second a lap quicker.
It's like, how when we always see Mercedes make a move, you go, oh, why did they do that? Now with Ferrari, when they make a move like that, we're always thinking, Ferrari, why did you do that? Now with Mercedes, you think when they make a move, you think the opposite. You think, okay, why did they do that?
Mhm.
Because it's something that we don't understand that
Let's
they
watch
did.
how this plays out.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, Mercedes is so on the game here.
As we talk about all different strategies, scenario 76 or whatever, I think of having that older brother, and he's much taller and longer wingspan, holding the football out of reach, and he just changes hands.
Yeah.
Oh, dang it! I didn't see that coming. And I feel like that's really what they've got now. They always talk about their computational power in strategies and everything that they are doing. Well, other teams are doing it too, but Mercedes just seems to execute on those better. And like I said, I don't know how many different scenarios we've seen that they pull out something that was like, oh, okay, wow, that worked.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's look at the overall results. Hamilton wins the race. Verstappen, Bottas, Charles Leclerc in fourth, Sergio Perez up to fifth, Daniel Ricciardo in sixth, Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris, Esteban Ocon, and Pierre Gasly in 10th, and Lance Stroll, Kimi Räikkönen, Sebastian Vettel, George Russell, Giovinazzi, Latifi, Alonso, Schumacher, and Mazepin. But what about, driver of the day? The voting right there a minute ago was neck and neck, Hamilton and Verstappen, but I was thinking Leclerc because Ferrari finishing fourth, that's a
Good result.
good result for them right now.
Mhm.
Yep, I'd go with that. That's the only, it's pretty much, you look down that list, bar Alonso going all the way down to 17th, they all pretty much competed to form,
Yeah.
from qualifying.
Yeah, Daniel Ricciardo having a good weekend. Let's see, Lando Norris in 8th. So the 6 and 8 for the McLaren team.
Shame for Ocon, he lost out at the start, having started 5th, finished 9th. Shame. I think I was hoping for better for him.
Yeah, and at one point, it looked like George Russell. I didn't get to see what happened there. I thought he was going to be battling for a point, but he ended up finishing 14th. And Bob, did you see that where Russell was on the precipice of getting a point there and then ended up all the way down there?
Yeah, well, this dovetails with something I was stewing about during the whole broadcast. There was a heck of a battle going on in the midfield. I mean, at one point, 1 second covered about 5 cars in the midfield, and yet our friends from Formula One television were droning on with Verstappen being chased by Hamilton. And I felt badly about that because that was a great tussle going on in the midfield. I don't know exactly what happened to Russell. I think it's notable that both Alonso and his Alpine teammate Ocon lost a lot of ground toward the end of the race. I think Alonso may have retired. I don't know why. What started out as a good day for the Alpine team kind of in the sour.
Yeah.
I agree. I was trying to keep tabs on Perez, Ricciardo, Sainz, and Norris, which we definitely got some better camera coverage on it. But I would have liked more in the backfield as opposed to the front few, because there was some good battles. There was some good side-by-side stuff. We saw Stroll doing some good side-by-side stuff, and one we wished he hadn't. But
let's face it, after the pit stop, after Hamilton stopped, it was inevitable at that point. It would have been nice to get a little more from the midfield. Talk about the race when Max got ahead of Hamilton. Jonathan, what do you think about the way he did that?
Great move. When you look at the onboard from Verstappen's point of view, they almost were identical in terms of how they got off the line. There was no wheel spin. Verstappen kind of looked as though he was going to get a bit of a drag and then ducked out probably earlier than Hamilton expected. And that power of the Honda in a straight line, not just at the start, but during the race, was clear. And the commentators, certainly on the BBC Radio 5 Live, were talking about the straight line speed of the Honda now not an issue against Mercedes. But Verstappen did exactly what I thought he would do. And Hamilton had the choice. He either came across and caused a collision or waited to fight another day. And that's exactly what he did. And you got a feel for Verstappen, because had Tsunoda not gone off, man, those two were in a world of their own at the time. So, and Verstappen was very much in the ascendance in terms of strategy before Tsunoda went out, which is ironic.
Bob?
And it's interesting, too, that, Jonathan, you pointed out before that Verstappen and the guy behind him, Leclerc, were going to start on the dirty side of the track. So you would expect them to struggle at the start. And yet they both picked up a spot at the start.
Yeah.
Verstappen beat Hamilton and Leclerc beat Bottas, and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, and that was it wasn't as dirty as we've perhaps seen, and I don't know whether that's lack of use or, i.e., you tend to get that race line very clean when there's a lot of traffic out there.
Maybe.
Yeah, no support races.
Yeah,
well, not many.
Well, guys, let's go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll get right back to this. Listen to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM. Back after a quick break. XM is brought to you by CrowdStrike. Use the cloud to secure your team at the office, at the track, or anywhere with CrowdStrike at crowdstrike.com/anywhere. All right, Gearheads, welcome to the show. We are going to break down the F1 Spanish Grand Prix here a little bit more, and we are also going to be joined by a guest, Jack Hawksworth, here in just a moment. And one thing that I want to make sure that we touch on is the fact that we are going to be talking a lot about Americans in Formula One, American influence in Formula One, American drivers in Formula One. We have 4/5 drivers in FIA Formula 3. I mean, the ladder system to Formula One doesn't get any more clear at that point. And with that many Americans in there, and they did pretty well this weekend.
And talented ones, too.
And talented, that's right. And fantastic story with Juan Manuel Correa coming back after the horrific incident that he was in the middle of and injured and all that. So it was really crazy. But we're going to talk all about that a little bit more later, a little later in the show. But I want to continue on let's talk about the Formula One Spanish Grand Prix today with Lewis Hamilton winning the race, ahead of Max Verstappen, primarily on the strategic maneuverings of Toto Wolff and team, and with really an easy win for Lewis Hamilton and continuing his legacy, Jonathan. I mean, it's just, we talked about it in the pre-race, but 100 podiums and now 97 wins. So really incredible, Lewis Hamilton.
It truly is. And I mean, I was trying to wrap my brain as to a parallel in any other sport. And, bar, you're talking some pretty heady heights. You're talking about what Jordan achieved in his career. You're talking about what Jimmy Johnson's done in NASCAR. It really isn't. It's a rarity, and in Formula One there tends to be dominance like a Schumacher, because 7 titles with Ferrari, mainly with Ferrari and so on. It's really hard to put a parallel there, and Hamilton is blasting a trail. And without putting too fine a point on it, he's done it against the odds. And what I mean by that is he came from nothing, quite literally. Yeah. And, he struggled and he worked it, and he's been on his own. He's not from a wealthy family. His father took 3 or 4 jobs, And that's what I think makes the story even better. Is that he's just done it against all odds.
Yeah. Bob Varsha, I want to ask you really kind of the same question, but I did notice this is his 5th consecutive win at Barcelona for Lewis Hamilton. And I think you even brought that up in the pre-show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tying Ayrton Senna, who won 5 in a row in Monaco. And it's a huge achievement. 6th overall victory. And with his next win, I believe I'm right in saying that he'll tie Michael Schumacher's record for 7 wins at a single racetrack, not necessarily in a row, but you know, it's just another facet in the gemstone that is Lewis Hamilton's ongoing career.
Yeah, just astounding. But well, guys, we do have our guest on the line. We want to bring him in via Zoom. We want to bring in our guest. But Jonathan, let me let you introduce him. I think it would be most appropriate.
Well, finally, I've got somebody I can talk to about my own kin, because he's a good northern lad. I may be from Lancashire, but I'll forgive him. He's from Bradford in Yorkshire, and his name is Jack Hawksworth, and we're delighted to have him. He's currently racing in IMSA, and he'll be racing again to defend his Mid-Ohio title. He's a bit of an expert there, and season just kind of getting underway with 2 sort of anomaly races with the 12 hours and the 24. But now we get down to the proper season, as it were, and Jack Hawksworth in a great position to go for glory with the Lexus team.
Well, Jack Hawksworth, welcome to Speed City. Jack.
Hey guys, how you doing? Thank you for having me on.
Great to have you. And I want to get your take on the subject. We've just been talking about Formula One. I want to ask you about being a race driver. What is your level of respect or whatever for Lewis Hamilton?
I actually just watched the Grand Prix. I've not watched one for quite a while, so it was interesting race. I mean, obviously Lewis has been hugely successful. Lewis and the combination of that Mercedes team has obviously been pretty kind of unstoppable the last few years. I'd like to have seen Max and obviously have a little bit of a better car underneath him in that race. It seemed like the Mercedes was just so dominant, right? Like they were talking about the strategy in the race about, should they have pitted or shouldn't they? But to be honest, they could have done any strategy in that race. It wouldn't have made any difference because the Mercedes was so much faster than the Red Bull car. And really, the only reason it was interesting was because Max obviously got that great start. So it made the race somewhat interesting, but the kind of conclusion was kind of written in stone as soon as I saw the beginning of that first stint and how quick Hamilton was.
What about the achievement that Hamilton has done over his career? I'm trying to put a parallel. You've grown up in the same era, and you've watched his career, I'm sure. There really is no parallel, is there? I mean, you can talk about what Dixon's done in Indy and Jimmy's done in NASCAR, but gosh, it's really hard to create a parallel to Lewis Hamilton's career in any other sport, even.
Yeah, he's a massive amount of respect. He's obviously done an unbelievable job. But with any of these things, it's not, you can't just point out one guy was the reason you win a race or you win a championship. It's the combination of Lewis, of that team of people he has around him, and the car he's got underneath him. And as a combination, they've been pretty unstoppable. But that's the case. That's always the case with motorsport. It's not one guy. It's a combination of many very intelligent people, good engineers, good mechanics, and a good driver. And it's obviously been really exceptional what they've done over that, especially the last kind of 5 or 6 years. That kind of dominance doesn't come around very often.
Jack, speaking of massive amount of respect, I got to talk about your career because you've had an amazing career. Just trying to scroll through all the championships, all the accolades, really, the Indy 500.
Diverse, too.
Yeah, and diverse, and now racing in IMSA. Really just fantastic to have you on the show and love your career. But let's talk about where you are right now in IMSA and what's going on there.
Yeah, thank you. I've been in my first IMSA race I actually did in 2014 when I was still racing in IndyCar at the time. But then I began full time in IMSA beginning of 2017 when I joined 3GT Racing, which was where the Lexus program originated. And I've been there ever since. Yeah, I've been with Lexus since 2017. Obviously, kind of seen the program grow together and whatnot. But we had a good run last year. We've had some good success, and we're kind of looking to build on that this season. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I enjoy racing him. It's a great championship, and competition's tough, so can't complain.
Mid-Ohio seems to be your track. They're going to name a corner after you if you're not careful. Last 2 races you've won there. Why there, and what about this weekend, next weekend?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Mid-Ohio, actually, like when I first came to the States, I always enjoyed the track, but it was never particularly one where I used to run really, really well at. I always used to look forward to the street circuits, and they were always my kind of tracks. But for whatever reason, the Lexus has just been hugely successful at this circuit. I think our car tends to create quite a bit of downforce. So with Mid-Ohio being kind of medium, high speed combination of corners and quite low tire degradation, it does suit our type of car. So last few years there have been awesome. So it's like the old saying goes, you always like the places you're successful, right? So now, yeah, Mid-Ohio is one of my favorite.
Jack, as a foreigner like myself, and somebody who's right in the thick of it as you are, you raced for Brian Herter. There's a lot of talk about Colton going to Formula One. Is he the right guy? You've probably raced against him. You probably know him. And, you know, we're talking about Sargent, Fittipaldi, Crawford, Carrera, all in Formula 3, all with a possibility. And there are a few others like Cameron Dass on the outside. But what's your take on Mario Andretti getting involved and saying Colton Herter's the guy? Do you think that's a possibility? And how important is that for American racing?
Yeah, well, actually, when I joined Brian Herter Autosport, I guess Colton was in his first year of car racing. I think he was doing a few USF 2000 races. So he's a bit younger than me, so we never competed against each other. But I remember him. He was like a 14-year-old kid, I think, when I was racing for his dad's team. But now he's obviously he's kind of rolls through the ranks and done a super good job. And I've followed bits of the IndyCar stuff the last couple of years, and he certainly seems like the guy who's come in and been able to make quite a statement. Him and Pato, like the 2 young guys who seem to have come in and been very, very competitive. So it would be interesting to see an American in Formula One. I think that kind of Formula One needs that to grow their American base. I think everybody knows that. Whether I don't know if that's what Colton wants to do. I mean, the one thing I would say is that at such a high level of racing, drivers tend to become specialised in what they're doing. You become specialised with the type of car you're using, on the type of tracks that you're driving on. And the difference between the guys is so small. We're talking like a tenth or two is the difference between being successful and not being successful. And he's in a position right now where he's in a great car, in a strong team in IndyCar. He knows all the tracks. He's comfortable, and he's probably got the potential in the next few years to really start to mount a championship challenge and begin to rack up those wins and perhaps championships. So even it would be a tricky decision for him, I would think, because for him to go to racing Formula One, suddenly now he's racing a completely different type of car, which is, obviously next year's car is going to be different. But if we look at this year's car, a lot more technology on them than an Indy car, completely different styles of circuits and types of circuits, different environment, different strategies. You don't refuel, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot. It wouldn't for him. He's probably got to, if it was an option, he's probably got to make a decision of, well, I've got to a very, very high level over here at the minute, and I'm probably right on the verge of beginning to be very, very successful. Or do I want to take a risk and go and learn a new trade, on the other side of the world, all over the world, right? But I don't think it's as straightforward as, I think there's a decision. If that is a possibility for him, then I think that it's still a decision that he would probably have to take seriously as well, because you can go one or two ways.
Jack, Bob Varsha here. You obviously have seen the racing scene on both sides of the pond. You've raced in a variety of different series. And I think you're spot on about how a decision has to be made by a young American driver if he wants to go over there and pursue a Formula One career. Is that an insurmountable object. I mean, Ron Dennis, when he ran the McLaren team, used to say the United States was the world's biggest island because, we thought we were the bee's knees and we didn't do anything else but race here at home. And there are advantages to racing at home and being successful and sleeping in your own bed at night and all that sort of thing. How long would it take, say, a Colton Herta to go over there and overcome the fact that he hasn't done a lot of racing? I think he's raced a little bit over there, but as you say, you got to learn the tracks, you got to learn the machinery, you got to learn the guys you're racing against. How long would it take for a young driver to gain that kind of experience?
I think it's a combination of factors. It's definitely, I think as well, it's more that when he's in such a good place now where he's been with the team for a few years, he's been in the series for a few years, and he's probably so comfortable now that he knows exactly, what that car's going to do before he even does it. He's engineering him are probably they probably know what they want from the car every weekend, and every weekend they're able to everything just comes very, very easily, and you're working on the really fine details. Now, if he went to Europe and went and raced in a completely different series, there's no doubt that if he's obviously talented guy, and he would get there, but it's just that there's a lot of unknowns. Number one, what's the team going to be like? Who he's running with? Is the car going to be competitive? He's building new relationships with the new guys, getting used to how the car reacts, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you can put like a time frame on it, but I just know that racing, especially nowadays, is becoming very specialized, where like guys are becoming really, really good. What they're doing in the series that they're racing in, and jumping from series to series, it's probably unlikely that it's 100% after 1 or 2 years in that series, you're going to be much more well-rounded in terms of your understanding of that particular series than you would be like on day one, year one in a series. So it's not that it couldn't be done, and it's not that I have no idea. I'm sure he could be very, very competitive, but like he's right now, what we know for sure is he's in a great car, in a great team, in a high-profile series, and he's got the opportunity to win racing championships. So to take a risk and go race in another series, you can't underestimate how important the equipment is in motorsport. It's everything, right? So if you find yourself in a good situation, a good team, to go and say, okay, I'm going to go and switch and go do something else is pretty big risks. I guess that would be my point. Is he's in a great situation as it is.
Great point.
Why not capitalize on that for a while?
Yeah, I know. When you were saying what you were saying, Jack, about switching, I was like, it is cold water on the Colton Herta discussion. But the other discussion that we're going to have here right after this break is all about the other Americans that are coming up through.
Who are already in Europe.
Exactly. In Europe, in the path. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and take a break and listen to Speed City live from Austin, Texas, back after a quick break.
Hi, this is Jay Leno from JayLenosGarage.com, and you're listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
Has your workforce moved from the office to the home or to the garage, or maybe a rented cabin with open Wi-Fi? If your company has expanded outside the office and moved all your applications to the cloud, there's a whole new world of threats you have to worry about, including ransomware. CrowdStrike revolutionized security by harnessing the speed and power of the cloud to identify and stop the most advanced cyber attacks, even those that have never been seen before. So now you can work securely anywhere. Try CrowdStrike Falcon free today and protect your data employees anywhere. Welcome to Anywhere. CrowdStrike, we stop breaches. Access the CrowdStrike Falcon platform free at crowdstrike.com/anywhere.
Yep, cabin in the woods or the doghouse.
Is that personal experience, Les? All right, we're going to move
Did you get
on.
good Wi-Fi in your doghouse? I
It
might come
works
over.
perfectly.
Well, we
It's a little
have
cold and there's some fleas, but it's good.
Okay.
we have our guest Jack Hawksworth with us, and Les, you wanted to ask him about the car he's driving.
Jack, I know of following the technology and the things that aren't so obvious. Anybody that has followed it, just about all that's left of that Lexus from a few years back is the logo. Tell us about what you're experiencing in the driver's seat with that.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, this is the 5th year for the car racing in IMSA. We took delivery of the car end of 2016, and the actual base of the car is very similar because with the GT3 rules, everything's homologated, but various things have changed in terms of we changed ABS systems on the car after 2017, and we've had different tires on the car ever since we began racing IMSA. So the development in terms of setup and just specifics like that are always different. And then alongside that, we've had 3 different teams effectively that have run the car. Started with 3GT Racing in Michigan, then moved to Canada, and it was AIM Vassar Sullivan, and now it's just Vassar Sullivan and based out of Charlotte. So a lot of different personnel, a lot of different engineers, mechanics, people with different ideas and things like that, which have helped us to develop the car to the point it's at today. And it's been a combination of a lot of people, which has kind of allowed us to make the car a little bit more competitive and compete at the front most weekends.
I just got to imagine that, I don't know where you're based currently, but I can't imagine that accent being too transparent in the Carolinas.
Yeah, I do have some problems. I can never order at Starbucks. It's just a nightmare. So I always get Aaron, my teammate.
A latte! Give us a latte!
You ain't from around here.
So good.
Well, Jack, talk about this next upcoming race for you and what your expectations are.
Yeah, so our next race is Mid-Ohio next weekend. We've had the first 2 races of the season, which were the 24 Hours of Daytona, 12 Hours of Sebring, which are the obviously the longer races for us. So now we're getting back into the shorter sprint races. It's a track we've been really successful at the last few years. Lexus have won 3 in a row there, and I've been part of the winning team at the last two races there. So it's one that we have pretty high expectations on. It's one which our car works very well at. So we feel pretty good about it. The start of the season for us, results-wise, hasn't been where we hoped it would be, but it's not been through kind of a lack of performance. The cars have been really quick at both Daytona and Sebring, but through various issues, we've just not actually managed to get the result yet. So we see this as a really important weekend to kind of kickstart the season at a track we've been very competitive at, and off the back of 2 races where the car's been very, very quick. We're hoping for a big weekend.
Well, you're certainly going to the opposite end of the spectrum from those 2 races. Mid-Ohio is a beautiful course, and I got to think, with the misses that you mentioned or the shortcomings do you think Mid-Ohio will play to those benefits? Will play into that being a strong point instead?
Yeah, I think so. We've won. I'd say we've been very successful in the past few years, and we feel like we've moved the game on a little bit this year. We feel like we've got a better understanding of the car and the tires. And as a team, it's my 2nd year together with Aaron Telitz driving together, so we've got a very good relationship. myself, Aaron, our engineer Jeff, and the rest of the team. So we feel that we're in a really strong position. And these sprint races tend to, I guess, sort themselves out in terms of pace order a little bit more than sometimes the longer races do. With the longer races like a Daytona 24, a Sebring 12, it's anything can happen. You know, there's so much time for stuff to go wrong, and to win one of those races, everything has to go perfect on the day. And we just didn't manage to do that at the first two rounds this year. But with it being a sprint race, I expect it to be a more kind of normal race. It's going to be more about qualifying and then speed during the race. So we feel pretty good about it. We're excited about it, and we really need to kind of kick the season off next weekend.
Jack,
So
the GTD class racing in particular in IMSA has just grown and grown and grown. And you mentioned that you're running a GT3 based car. How do you explain this explosive growth in the GT classes, and what does it mean for the future? Will this continue to rise?
Yeah, I hope so. I think that IMSA is in a really good position, and I think that GTD, in terms of looking into next year and looking beyond, in terms of maybe this convergence between GTLM and GTD as it stands today, I think is a really good thing for the sport. I think it's just a good place for manufacturers to be. You know, we're racing the cars, which essentially they are based very much off the production vehicle that you buy and drive off the forecourt. You know, the car we're racing, the RCF GT3 car, the power plant in the car and things like that are all very much, you know, as you would buy off the road. Obviously, a lot of the car is very different, but the actual heart of the car and the philosophy behind it is the same as the street going version. So for all these manufacturers who we're competing against, and I think in IMSA and GTD there is like 11 different manufacturers. There's the Lexus, you know, Porsche, Lamborghini, Audi, BMW. We're racing against a lot of different manufacturers. Ferrari. I think for the manufacturers it's great because they get to showcase the road car, which is racing on a circuit, something that they all, you know, which is based off what they sell. So I think that kind of I think that's kind of the reason behind the growth.
Well, Jack, we're going to send Jonathan Green up to Mid-Ohio to monitor your activities and your...
I thought you were going to say,
create mayhem. I'm looking forward to seeing you on the podium, my friend.
I hope so, mate.
I'll be there. I'll have a pint. I'll have a pint of bitter for you. But you haven't had one of them for a while.
Well, I want to ask. I want to move back to the Americans moving up through the ladder, and I want to get Jack's take on this because, well, Jonathan, you've been pushing this. We've been talking about this entire week with F3 launching this week, and these Americans. And let's run down that list again because we've got. Let me bring that back up because we've got Logan Sargent. In fact, I'm going to look at the standings right now. Because in FIF3, you got Logan Sargent, who's an American, in 10th. And then you got Jack Crawford in 13th. Juan Manuel Correa, of course, we all know his story. He's in 15th. And then we have Enzo Fittipaldi, who's racing under a Brazilian, but he's born in Miami.
He's an American.
So we're taking him as an American. And then we have, in 25th, Kalen Frederick.
Yeah.
So we have 5 Americans. When's the last time we've had 5 Americans in the true ladder to Formula One? I mean,
and Kalen Frederick has a crossover with Jack because of Pelfrey. Is that right?
Oh, right?
Jack, is that right?
Yeah, I did race for Pelfrey. I didn't realise that he did. I drove for Team Pelfrey back in 2012.
Yeah, there you go. But, this goes back to what Bob was saying and certainly what Jack was saying is, the most likely to succeed out of that group, which is the real question, is it not, is Logan Sargent, for the simple reason that he has been in Europe for the large part of his career, starting with karting just as Jack did. And he is acclimatized, if you will, to the European way, and in fact lost his way a little bit when he was due to go to F2 this season, and it all fell apart and he didn't get the drive. He came back to the States. He also didn't really kind of fit, didn't find a perfect fit here. And he's managed to go back with Charus Racing, which is not a bad team, and likewise has been joined by Enzo, who also was having a rough time of it because he was coming back to the States to go to F4. I saw him at the first F4 race. He's younger than Pietro, and obviously he too has been with his brother in Europe for some time. So, those two are the more.
Him on the show. We're going to get as many of these guys on the show as we can in the next couple of weeks. But Jack, what do you think about Jonathan's assessment of Logan being the most likely one to move up quickly?
Well, I don't know all of the guys that you just mentioned, but I do know Logan a little bit, and I think he was pretty successful last year, right, in Formula 3. So that always bodes well. And then the Jack Crawford, was it, who you said was on the Red Bull program? I think that just being a part of that program is, I would have thought, a pretty good opportunity in terms of opening doors and things to kind of get into Formula One. So I would have said probably pretty good assessment there based on kind of my limited knowledge of what's been going on.
Okay, I got a question for you, Bob Varsha. What do you think about how we got here? So the Liberty Media has been saying it. Everyone's been saying it. We've been saying it, that we need American drivers. Do you think we got here with people, Americans listening, going, hey, there is an opportunity to make a massive impact to the sport? Or is it people with money getting behind it? Is it a little bit of everything? How do you think we got here all of a sudden with 5 drivers in FIF3?
Well, it's fun to speculate about. I think maybe the growing popularity of Formula One may be catching some of these drivers' eyes. I mean, Jack made a great point earlier, and that was, when a guy gets to Colton Herta's level right now, Colton's a very young man, but he's having tremendous success at the top of the heap in American motorsports. He's making good money. It's, he's tied by a golden chain, you might say, the way the guys before him who tested Formula One cars, Al Unser Jr., Rick Mears, Jeff Gordon, on and on and on.
Michael Andretti.
I remember when my old TV colleague, Danny Sullivan, was running the Red Bull driver selection program way back when. And he told me, Red Bull's not looking for early 20s guys that they can develop. They're looking for teenagers. They're looking for, 16-year-olds that they can educate and groom in the way that Jack is talking about. You need to run the tracks. You need to learn the cars. You need to learn the competition. And it's tough to ask a guy who's a big star over here to suddenly, try a Michael Andretti and jump right into the deep end overseas. So, I think these young guys all have a shot. I mean, obviously, we all know they need the funding. They're going to have to find that in order to advance their careers or go, under the wing of some Formula One team that has the resources and is willing to spend it on them. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Of course, their interest has to maintain high, has to be high as well. I don't know how many of these young guys are, sleeping in the back of their rental cars or all the things that we heard today's stars talk about doing in their early days. But it's a complex equation, bringing these kids up and finding that one needle in a haystack who goes on to be a Grand Prix star.
All right, gentlemen, we need to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue our discussion about the American influence in Formula One. You're listening to Speed City, and we'll be back after these messages.
Hey, this is Tony Stewart. You're listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back to the show. I want to pause the fun a little bit and talk a little bit about three-time Indianapolis winner Bobby Unser passing away at the age of 87, and I want to get your take on that, Bob Varsha.
Well, it's obviously a very, very sad piece of news. Uncle Bobby was a very strong character and a huge personality, something, every racing series really needs in these days of corporate vanilla. Don't go out and say anything controversial or whatever. Bobby was always ready to tell you exactly what was on his mind. And it's kind of appropriate we talk about him here because Bobby did have a very brief dalliance with Formula One. He, back in 1968, entered 3 races, had to withdraw from 2 of them because he was also running a USAC schedule. And he was told by the governing body over in Europe that he could not race in a Grand Prix if he had run a USAC race within the previous, 24 or 48 hours.
24.
He did finally get into a Grand Prix driving a BRM for the Owen Racing Organization, 1968 at Watkins Glen, but the engine let him down. There's a great story about Americans, particularly stars like Bobby Unser, coming to race Formula One in the United States. Tim Considine wrote a terrific book about Yanks in Formula One, and it's worth a read. But Bobby was one of a kind and certainly missed.
Yeah, one of the things, I know we all know him for the 3-time Indy wins, but something that he did that actually struck me as something much more just powerful is his dozen Pikes Peak International Hill Climb wins in the dirt days.
Dozen. Wow.
In the dirt days, too. And
Yeah.
he set records. He drove everything crazy. He was one of the ones that would take a sprint car and reconfigure a sprint car to rip up the mountain. But to do it a dozen times, I mean, he was the king of the mountain for the longest time there.
I have one memory. I used to do the 500 for Sky Sports, and it was really basically to do the media day on the Thursday. So I was kind of free. If something really interesting happened, then sure, they might come to me. But I'd have the rest of the weekend off, and I remember spending a good part of a weekend almost with Bobby and his wife. And my abiding memory of him, not only was he a superstar and so gracious, he was funny. Really funny. We had a laugh. And he didn't care who you were. If you were in his presence, you were one of the gang.
Absolutely. Jonathan and I went to the 100th together, and it was so amazing that Jonathan was immediately recognized from a plane flight the previous year. Weren't you all on the plane together and
With Bobby
heckled each other, and then so we run into him down on
No,
pit
that was
lane.
Big Al.
Oh, that was Al. That was Al. Okay.
I got an autograph.
Yeah. And so anyway, we're on pit lane, and Bobby is exactly that. It's you're my new friend, and have fun. And anyway,
we spent the day slagging off Danica Patrick, to put it in perspective. So there you go.
But I want y'all to look at this photograph that I'm proud I took, but it was so neat to see Jonathan meet Bobby and have that chat on pit lane.
It's pretty cool.
I'm trying to find ways of identifying American drivers, and doesn't expect to see one on the grid in the next few years. And it is. I think, I hate to say it, but that's probably the most realistic. Going back to what our guest Jack Hawksworth said a few minutes ago, that it is hard to yank someone or to jump right out of, like Colton Herta, jump right out of IndyCar, especially with the success he's having. But I do like the fact that this is a topic right in the middle of these investor calls. And he goes on to further to say, we're working with teams to really try and understand what's the possibility for American drivers to come to the attention of Formula One teams. And he says this could come, I don't think, being very pragmatic or realistic, and it's coming in the next 2 to 3 years. But yes, after that, maybe that's what he's looking at, is FIA Formula 3.
Yeah, I mean, the possibility is so much greater now that the FIA are part of the US system in terms of F4 and F3, and there are super license points available. That is a huge step that's only happened in the last couple of years.
Yeah, good
Honda
point.
Honda have stepped up, and I'm sure Jack would have would loved this opportunity if he'd had the time, if he'd come to America earlier, and the opportunity to get into Super Formula in Japan is on offer to win the F3 championship now. And so what I'm getting at is that you could follow in the footsteps of Alex Palau and Pato O'Ward and go to Japan and be racing just as Gasly has done to great effect and make it that way. But the fact that you can get super license points now in the USA, and funnily enough, Carl Kirkwood, who raced with Jack as well, another one who could have gone that path. It's unlikely, and he'll make his way here. But, we've got talent is what I'm saying here in the States that is world class.
Yeah, and we've talked all about, on the pre-show, we talked all about money in Formula One, how it drives everything. Well, with the success of Netflix, popular, making the show popular, with ESPN broadcasting literally everything from F3 to F2 to Formula One, everything all weekend long, you get every single one. There's money, there's eyeballs on this, which means money, which means maybe this could really happen. But and speaking of the Netflix series, Jack, I want to ask you, Jack Hawksworth, I want to ask you about in the United States, this Netflix has really caught the attention of the American fan. What about back home and everywhere else? Are you seeing the same kind of uptake as we have been seeing with Netflix?
Yeah, I think that it's just kind of brought Formula One and motorsport to a broader audience, right? Because you're always going to have your hardcore fans, your hardcore racers who are watching and kind of up to date on everything. But what the Netflix series does is it's like a soap opera. It's like a soap opera, right? So as much as it's about the cars and the racing and everything, when you watch the Netflix series, there's a story behind it all, and it's all about what's going on off the track, the politics of it, all that kind of stuff. And I don't think, for people who don't know motorsport, they don't really realize, especially Formula One, which is like a Shark Tank, right? They don't really understand. They don't really know how much politics and how much drama there is in the background before the cars even go onto the circuit. So I think that series has done a really good job of kind of bringing that side of stuff to a bigger audience. And I mean, I've been surprised myself. Many people who come up to me, my friends and things like that, who had never followed racing before or followed it very, very, occasionally if the Formula One's on the TV on a Sunday afternoon or something. I've watched the Drive to Survive series, and it was great, and like it really has, it's got out to a lot of people who would not normally watch motorsports. So I think it's been a good thing.
I mentioned to the guys off air the other day that I've got a neighbor who is mildly interested in the cool cars that roll up to my house. Not that I can afford them, but anyway. And so that spurred things, and they started watching the F1 series on Netflix. And what was so cool was the husband actually got in trouble because he watched an episode without the wife sitting next to him to watch it too. And again, this is somebody who had near zero motorsports interest, but they're now hooked, and so much that he gets in trouble if he cheats on his wife and watches one more episode without her.
Yeah. And I mentioned ESPN, but the numbers are up, and apparently up 50% after the first three races this year. So this, I mean, we've seen the little spikes here and there, but this is looking like we really have some major bump in viewership.
And the other side of it, we can talk about drivers, and we've pinpointed the fact that it is hard to leave a cushy place, which is America, especially as Bob said, when someone like Colton's earning decent money, people like Jack coming from abroad, it's so much tougher in England, and have found, as many other English drivers have, a home here in the States. But I do think that, forget the drivers for a second, because it is such a global sport, and it's hard for Americans to make that transition. Not that it's impossible, but the fact that we could potentially have 3 Grand Prix, and we just saw this story story, Roger Penske saying that he has had several discussions
Yes.
with Dominicali about, and Roger Penske will bring
Yeah.
a Formula One race
Yeah.
It's going
if he
to
wants
happen.
it.
If Roger Penske says it, it's like E.F. Hutton.
Yeah.
People are going to listen.
People don't know who that is anymore.
3 Grand Prix is a rock compared to what we've had in the past.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we got to take a break. First of all, I want to wish all the mothers out there happy Mother's Day.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And y'all are going to have to do the rest of the show without me because I'm going to go see my mother. She's an hour away in small town
Oh,
Texas.
you're just going to one-up us on that because we're just useless. Huh?
Exactly. I'm
I
going
see.
to bail on you guys to go see my mom. So,
I'll be in the doghouse.
all right, we'll be back after a quick break.
Hello to everyone, this is Gunther Steiner, this is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
Welcome back to Speed City, and you can see those 2 big superstars, one of Netflix, that of course is Gunther Steiner, and the other Billy Joel, who will be playing in concert at COTA this Grand Prix in October. So get your tickets now, get ready for that. We are delighted to have both Jack Hawksworth with us via Zoom, and we've, of course, got Bob Varsha. We've been talking about the subject of Americans in Formula One, and we've been talking also about the investment that Americans are making in Formula One and how much influence from Zach Brown to Otmar Safnauer and so many others, and then the Canadian influence as well, obviously with Stroll, etc. And Les, talking of Cody, you were out there, weren't you, yesterday?
Yeah, I was out there yesterday. Big proponent of Make-A-Wish, and got to thank in particularly the team at COTA that helped deliver Wish Day. And Andre was a Ferrari racer at only 6 years old. His pit crew was a little bit younger. His pit crew was 4 years old, but we had a fantastic time making a dream and a wish come true for Andre. And, buddy, we wish you the best.
There you go. Thank you for that. And we'll be keeping you up to date on all things COTA as it appears. But I'm really excited for COTA. They had a miserable pandemic year. They came out of it by putting on drive-through vaccinations, of which I am a recipient. Very delighted. So thank you, Mr. Epstein, for getting us in there and for letting so many of the
You let
Austin
him
community.
take a needle to you?
No, not him.
Okay.
No, I mean, really successful contribution that they made with Seton, and helped a lot of folks out in Austin.
Up to the capacity of,
10,000.
I think it was right at 10,000 a day.
A day. Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And they got to those numbers too.
That was
the
amazing.
experiment weekend that I was part of, the first one, was, to see how it would went. Got 3,000 without really any marketing or anything else. So a really good, and like I said, a first real feel-good story. We had the NASCAR press conference the other week. It felt like the world had suddenly changed and we were back. But talking of being back, let's start with Bob for a second. Bob, I mentioned Penske and I mentioned Indianapolis. Miami is going to be reality now. COTA's already a strong thing, and that's something we didn't really have, a proper home, an FIA Grade 1 track. We've got that now. Will a third potential race finally push us over the edge?
I think it could very well happen for all the reasons that have already been mentioned. I mean, if Roger Penske wants to bring Formula One back to Indianapolis, I don't think you'd get any pushback from the rest of the Formula One world. I mean, let's face it, this is the United States. Every manufacturer of every product imaginable wants to be in the United States market, and the teams all want to be here. The manufacturers, the constructors that they back, they want to sell cars in the United States. So we've had 3 races in the U.S. before, back in '82 with Long Beach, the short-lived Dallas race, and Detroit. And as you say, we've got real purpose-built Grade 1 facilities now in COTA, and a great street race in Prospect at Miami. So why not go back to the most famous racing circuit in the world at Indianapolis and complete the trifecta? It certainly makes sense to me, and I'd love to see it happen.
Yeah, I think it is exciting times. If you don't know the history of Formula One in the United States, it's kind of, it had a home with Watkins Glen for a while, and then we did a few street races here and there, from Dallas to Las Vegas to so on and so forth.
Right.
But really, this last decade has cemented both a relationship with a crowd here, and we just mentioned the ESPN figures going up. But
the logistics of a calendar with that many races, and I'm going to add in Montreal and Mexico City, I worry that will dilute it. But somebody responded to a comment when I put that online, and they said, look at some of the races geographically in Europe, and they're not much different in proximity to each other. So it seems to be working over there, sans pandemic. So I'm hoping it'll work here too.
Well, I'll tell you what, you talk about, proximity. The Montreal race has been, June the 9th, June 11th for forever.
Yeah,
and it's Bob will tell you, it's a really popular race. And I think Miami is now being lined up to be next to it either before or after. And that bodes well for the, if I were a European wanting to go to 2 really good races, those could be a heck of a 2-trip trip, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. But of course, Austin is penciled in. It's going to happen anyway. You got to come to Austin.
Let's go back to Jack. Jack, you had a theory, we were talking in the break, and I like it, about who is most likely. I said Logan because of both his background and the fact that he's been in Europe and he's been successful in Europe. But tell me your theory on who you think or what kind of driver could make it from America into Formula One.
Well, I think my kind of theory on it is with Formula One, especially at the minute, and this is from the outside looking in, right? Just trying to theorize a little bit, but it seems that in Formula One, the only way to enter Formula One is to almost be pulled in from the outside, right? So the way I think it happens is, and I think 3 races in America, like you're talking about, Miami, Texas, and Indy would be fantastic. The Drive to Survive series, the interest is on the up. I think it takes somebody like a Red Bull saying, right, we want to have a fast American driver in Formula One. And this, as you were saying earlier on the show, there's lots of very talented kids coming up through the ranks in America. You've got a ton of them to choose from. What it really takes is somebody like Red Bull saying, we want to make this happen, and we're going to take this kid, we're going to develop him, and then we're going to put him in a proper team in Formula One, which is going to give him a chance to show what he can do, and then obviously, take that next step, hopefully to the Premier team. So I do think it can happen, but I think that it's got to be a guy who is being pulled in, because it seems the only guys who get to Formula One nowadays are you're either part of one of these driver programs, of which there are very, very few of them, or it's a guy who's bringing substantial amounts of money to be there. So I think it can happen, and I think that the market, the way it is right now, and the interest level in America going up, I think that there's probably it will perk somebody's interest, like a Red Bull or something like that, and they'll try and make that happen. So I feel like that'll be the way that this thing goes, and that's probably, in my opinion, where the next kind of Formula One star will come from, out of America. And it's the right way to have a successful one as well, because what you don't really want is a guy who's coming in a team which is not competitive. What will spark the interest of Americans is if they have a driver who is competing at the front, who is in a good team and is able to compete for podiums and wins and that kind of thing. If they're running around in an uncompetitive team, finishing 16th, 17th, and I don't actually know if that does a whole lot for the sport in America. It needs to be an American guy in a good team who's able to compete and give the Americans somebody to cheer for, because Americans love cheering for the Americans, right?
And winners. Yeah, Alexander Rossi, good example. Great driver, as he's proving now in Indy, but he was never going to spark an interest in the States racing for Caterham.
Yeah.
No, exactly. It's not nothing. It's just they're not. If you're racing for a team like that, you're not competitive and there's no interest in it. So it has to be somebody in a proper team, able with the opportunity to get proper results. That'll be the way that it grows, I think.
Y'all said a couple of things there. Some are bringing money. We want the Americans. We got to perform good. So if we had somebody bring in a bunch of cash and have an American team, I mean, Williams has an American influence in it now. What if we had an American come into Williams? Williams is certainly showing better now. We've always focused on Haas since conception of Haas.
Yep.
But
that's a possibility.
How quick do you think somebody would get behind an American being with Williams? To me, Williams is a kindred spirit of Formula One history for me. Frank and everything that he went through to get there, and his career before he was in a wheelchair was on its way up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things there that I want Williams to stay Williams named, for one.
Mm-hmm.
And getting an American onto the Williams team, I think, might be another alternative to Haas.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, the one guy we haven't really talked about, Pietro Fittipaldi, stepped in to the Haas team last year when Romain Grosjean could not race after that accident, and did a sterling job. He has all the capabilities, having raced in Europe, and is now back in Indy, more due to the fact that there wasn't really a seat for him per se. But I don't think we've seen the best of Pietro. He's got the name. Bob, your thought? Pietro Fittipaldi's in IndyCar now, but he's got all the credentials that we've been talking about, and of course he's got that famous name.
Yeah, that's true. And I frankly don't know, and probably shouldn't speculate about Pietro's career path to this point. Certainly, he is a recognizable figure. As to what he's accomplished thus far, and whether that merits consideration for a big step up on the racing ladder, I don't know, frankly. But he certainly has the name. He has a great personality, and if he can put up a lap time, he'd be a great addition.
Yep, and so there's lots to talk about. Get your tickets to F1 if you haven't. You've been listening to Bob Varsha, zooming in, and he'll be with us again, I'm sure, for Monaco, which is coming up on May 21st to 23rd. It is the crown jewel of Formula One. So tune in to SiriusXM and join us for that. My thanks to Jack Hawksworth for the Vassar Sullivan Lexus team. He'll be racing at Mid-Ohio, who he is a winner at the last 2 times. So watch out for IMSA really getting underway, having had the 24 hours and the 12 hours. But IMSA hits the ground running at Mid-Ohio next weekend. So join Jack and the boys. My thanks to Les Kaiser. And I can't believe John's just upped us on that. I'm going to go and see my mother. I'm sure you're going to go and see your... I mean, you know... It's Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. We're running out of time. Don't forget, plenty coming to COTA, including Billy Joel. If you haven't already bought your tickets, that's what's happening in October at COTA. My thanks to Bob Varsha, Jack Hawksworth, and Les Kaiser. I'm Jonathan Green. And for John Massingale, who's popped off, he'll be back next week. Join us for the Monaco Grand Prix next time out.
Ciao, y'all.